3:30 p.m. by the studio clock, and it's now time to dive into the next session for this afternoon. If there are challenges, there are also tools we can use to overcome those challenges. Now, if your challenge today is how to build a stronger and scalable business model, then you're at the correct place. You can learn everything you need to in this fireside chat about using data and tools to build a stronger, scalable business model. And who better than our next speaker to talk to us about this subject? Now, he is someone who comes with a background of working on businesses, building engagements across a variety of sectors and areas such as data centers, digital music, financial services, and organized retail. As an associate at McKinsey, way back, to being a venture capitalist, to scaling up operations in India for Oyo, and to now being a part of the core management team, taking care of building and expanding Oyo globally. Oh, and he's also an alumnus of the Indian School of Business. I thought I should mention that. Let's welcome Mr. Maninder Gulati, Chief Strategy Officer, Oyo, in conversation with an entrepreneur we all can learn lots from. Now, he has over 20 years of professional experience in the technology sector with a focus on digital transformation and customer experience. And he's been featured in global publications such as the Wall Street Journal and the Entrepreneur magazine. We know him as both founder and CEO of Net Solutions and also the past president of TiE Chandigarh. Please welcome Mr. Sameer Jain as the moderator of this fireside chat. Now we can do something different here. Real nahi to virtual applause hi sahi. I would request our audience to type clap, clap, clap or applause in the chat box and keep it buzzing with comments and questions throughout. Over to you, Sameer sir, to take this fireside chat forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Niharika. Maninder, if you're on the screen now, very warm welcome to you and to TiECon Chandigarh. As we were, discussing just a few minutes ago, you were part of TiECon in Mumbai in what year 2000? Was it before that?
I was a student at IIT Bombay at that time, and TiE had just begun its chapters, I think, in India at that time.
Great. So I'm glad you're familiar with TiE and TiECon and our ecosystem here. So today you have many entrepreneurs from this region listening to you, and hopefully they can go back with some actionable tips for their own businesses. But let me take a step back and let's talk about the time when you were at Lightspeed Ventures. And yesterday when we were talking, you said something very interesting, that you were evaluating Oyo at that time. So if you may tell the story about how you were a part of that system that you were evaluating Oyo, and how did you end up investing in it?
First of all, thanks Niharika and Sameer for having me, and thanks for the warm introduction. It's a pretty serendipitous story. I actually, stayed back late Saturday night watching a video of Sarah Lacey, who used to host Pando Daily. It was a very popular blog in Silicon Valley. And she was talking to Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel was talking about this 20 under 20 program, where he had given 100K grants to 20 kids across the world to drop out and start something. And what I saw interesting was that there was just this one Indian entrepreneur. There were actually two. One of them was based in the Valley and the other one was based in India. That's how I actually sort of, got to know about Ritesh and reached out to him. Ritesh was just 18 and a half at that point of time. And, what was interesting was the kind of consumer and partner insights he had, even though he was very young, resonated a lot with how we saw the Indian sort of, stay industry, because, there was these sort of fragmented hotels, but there was no brand, that could offer affordability, ubiquity, convenience to customers. And, to have this young kid sort of, elaborate that was very special. So I did two things. I went to, if some of you know Delhi, Gurgaon, you would know this area called Mahipalpur, where there is sort of, a high street of literally 50 to 60 hotels. And, I went to 5-6 of those hotels, and I actually saw what Ritesh was speaking about, as a first-hand experience. There was no standardization, pricing was all, based on who the manager is at that point of time. And I thought to myself, it's very difficult if I stand here and look at these 50 hotels and I'm a tourist to Delhi. It's very difficult for me to choose and be informed about which one of these sort of, 50 hotels should I stay at. And that's when sort of, it hit me that one out of these five hotels, if it was Oyo and sort of, branded hotel, that would be amazing, because, depending upon, which location I want to go to, I can actually choose that. And that's how the, thought process started. And then, I chatted with Ritesh, and I had not seen, an entrepreneur in India, and I evaluated all the, e-commerce and sort of, the ride sharing and all of those sort of, platforms, but I had not seen somebody like Ritesh, who at such a young age had the right insights, the sort of, execution and hunger, and most importantly, a very, very sort of, bold vision of what the future could look like. So that sort of, mix and the sort of, market insight was very special. And we got convinced, and 2013 is when we sort of, invested in Oyo.
Okay, that was like 8 years, almost 8 years ago, and it's amazing that you're still invested in the Oyo story. So maybe you could talk about your role at as a chief strategy officer, in fact, a global chief strategy officer now that Oyo is a global organization. So what are your roles and responsibilities?
So look, Oyo's leadership is very, very unique, right? It is a non-hierarchical bureaucratic setup. Most of us have played multiple roles. I mean, when I came in, I told Ritesh, look, I'll take a title, right? Don't worry about that, because I was an investor in Oyo, so I was sort of, transitioning into a very different role. I said, I'll take a title and I'll help you build the company. And alongside, I had, our chief operating officer Abhinav, Abhishek, who's our, CFO, so on and so forth, right? So I just did that, and I started with what was important for the company. So at that point of time, we were figuring out the business model, where we were only initially doing partial room inventory, and we wanted to sort of shift to a full inventory model, which will give us a lot more trust with our merchants and hotel partners. So for the first 1 year or so, I sort of focused on that. Then came this whole thing of data sciences, and how do you think about pricing, personalization, and a lot of such aspects. Sort of moved on to that, and then both Abhinav and I were running the India P&L and scaling Oyo up till about 2018. And I was also managing some of the acquisitions we did, like weddings, as well. So I was both, along with Avinav, running the P&L and managing M&A, for India. And this was sort of, till the 2018 phase, after which, international expansion became, a prominent part of my role. One of the biggest bets there we took was acquisition of Athleisure, which is the second largest vacation home platform in the world. This is in Europe. It's available in all European countries. And 2019 and a part of 20, I spent a lot of time in Europe and in China for some of this international expansion bit. And then 2020 is of course a different story for all of us. So for us, it's literally about what is needed for the organization at what point of time, and three, four of us sort of switch a lot of roles over the last sort of 5 to 6 years to make that happen.
And your revenue from India versus the international revenue, what percentage is international, what percentage is Indian?
Yeah, so I can't talk specific numbers in sort of public forum, but if I was to sort of give a rough split, like we do get substantial part of our sort of gross margin dollars, or sort of net revenue from the West itself, right? And Europe is a big part of it, right?
Understood.
So India obviously used to be more than 90% of the business, and slowly and steadily it sort of would have dropped much lower than that.
And that was why I was asking you that question, given that you're based in London and not in India. So is there a strategic reason why you're there, or is that just because you choose to be there?
Yeah, so when I started to sort of look at our vacation homes business as well, because that's a business that we had acquired, and there was a significant period of post merger integration and how to think about that business. I wanted to be close to that business. Now that business itself is based in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Zurich. So we have a bunch of sort of different locations. So it's closer, to be, in London to Amsterdam, Zurich, and Copenhagen. So, that was one of the, more important reasons to be here.
And are hotel rooms the primary business for Oyo, or because I remember you branching into
Yeah.
other areas as well?
So hotels and homes, right now we are focused on hotels and homes as a market across the world. So it's both those formats, I would say, are the key.
Got it. And so today's topic is using data metrics and tools to build a stronger, scalable business model.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand, what does that strategy playbook look like in Oyo, and what sort of framework do you have when you take these decisions?
So look, I think strategy is different based on different phases of company. So I
Mhm.
can talk through three or four key phases that we have seen as Oyo. So obviously the first phase was, I would say, a hyper growth phase. I would think 2000 14 to sort of 16 17 was sort of that phase. Or let me rewind back. I think the first phase was the establishing the model phase, right? And that is where 2013 to sort of 15 was that, and that's where you end up using a lot of experimental strategies, right? And one of the core experimental strategies for us was, what are the different types of deals we should have with our hotel owners, right? And there was a deal which relied on minimum guarantees, there was a deal which didn't rely on minimum guarantees, and how do you A/B test in different type of cities, how to sort of those kind of things perform, both from an economics perspective and from a retention perspective. So we did test out sort of partial and full room, minimum guarantee, non-minimum guarantee, and a lot of these things in trying to sort of understand what model would eventually work. So that was sort of one phase where we did that. The second phase was this sort of hyper growth phase, and that was about just market expansion. So that's where we got to work on what is the total addressable market in India, what is the sort of TAM, like what is the sellable addressable market, and how do you penetrate into sort of cities. So one of the biggest questions we were asking ourselves is, should Oyo be in 100 cities, should Oyo be in 200 cities, or should 100 Oyo be in 800 cities, right? And how do you think about the marginal revenue and marginal cost of penetration as you're sort of building up that depth into different types of cities? How do you figure out the long term cost of service in those cities, because a lot of these things sort of become remote? What is the mix of business versus leisure? What is the sort of proposition that appeals to Oyo customers the most? So a lot of sort of those kind of sort of decisions, and we had these frameworks to build that. And that is when sort of when you're doing hyper growth on the supply side, what happens is your customer base also sort of grows, and that's where personalization and pricing and sort of those things take prominence. And so that was that sort of phase, and we used a lot of data sciences tools, especially on pricing and personalization in that phase. And then the third phase was this sort of international expansion phase, where you're asking yourselves the questions, which international markets have the most TAM, the most SAM, where will sort of Oyo model fit well, what should be the strategy in each of the markets, right? Depending upon the local context of the market, the local competitive nature of the market. So you would execute a China very different from the way you would execute UK, right? So poles apart, right? And those were the kind of sort of decisions that we had to take in the third phase, which was more in the sort of 2018 sort of 19 era, right? So these are the sort of three phases and three different types of decisions. But what has remained at the heart of it is our supply acquisition and revenue management systems, which we have continued to strengthen in the form of data sciences. So we have two or three different data sciences teams sitting in different parts of the world, and they do a lot of good work on like I mentioned, pricing, personalization on the consumer side, and then on lead generation and creating a very fluid product for hotel and homeowners to onboard on the supply side. So that those sort of foundation layers of product and data sciences continue to get created, and on top of that, we overlay a lot of these international and product market type of decisions as we go along.
So this journey reminds me of the InMobi kind of journey: launch in India, perfect your product in India, and then launch in other geographies. But given that InMobi is a software product and yours is a lot of physical elements to it, would you say that you sort of perfected the model in India before you launched in Japan or China? And you, like you said, Japan, China, and UK were very different. So how did you sort of
So, look,
strategize there?
I remember this book by the HP CEO long back called Perfect Enough. So I wouldn't say we had perfected the model, we were perfect enough, because in these markets we still had to figure out what would be the supply acquisition strategy that would be perfect. So supply acquisition strategy can range from putting feet on the ground, right, and on the street, to all the way up to complete digital acquisition, where an entire lead and onboarding is digital itself, right? And somewhere we had to sort of say that, look, in this country, based on our objectives, this is the mix of supply acquisition strategy and demand acquisition strategy. So it would change quite a bit, and we would learn and evolve. So I would say that nothing is perfect, because I think we would keep learning about India and every geography that we are in for the next 10 years, 20 years to come as well. But we had some sense of what are we looking for in this market, right? What would product market fit look like? How competitive is the market, and how fast, and hence how fast we need to go. So based on that, we would tweak the OYO model a little bit. One of the examples I can give you is when we came to UK and US, we understood that the brand and standardization might be a little bit more important, and hence the model that we launched here, or the brand that we launched here, was our highest priced brand, which was OYO Townhouse. Whereas in India, that brand strategy would look sort of very different, right?
Mm.
We did launch a mixture of a supply acquisition strategy, which was not just based on feet on the street, but it also had a remote component, with the team sort of sitting in India, which would do a lot of the sort of lead curation before somebody would go and actually pitch to the hotel on the ground. So I would say a lot of these things evolved, but what we were clear was, what does product market fit look like? So there is a certain percentage of direct demand, there is a certain lift that we need to provide to hotel partners, there is a certain repeatability that we need to establish on the consumer side. So we knew what these 3 4 metrics look like in India, and when we do China or US or Indonesia and Malaysia, what should these 4 metrics look like? So that is something that we did have an idea about, based on our India learnings, and then we would sort of go about evolving the supply acquisition and demand model as we sort of penetrate into the country.
So I was reading somewhere that SoftBank is one of your biggest investors, and typically with SoftBank, they push you really hard, with hyper growth, and it's almost like running on a treadmill all the time, just trying to grow everywhere you're going.
Yeah.
And that obviously would lead to maybe that, or even other reasons, because of the hyper growth. There would be challenges, and sometimes you strategize and say, this is how we see things going, and then things really don't go that way. So could you talk about some strategies that work, some strategies that didn't work for you?
Yeah. Look, I would put the SoftBank thing aside, because one of the reasons I came on board OYO is because in 2015, when I was still as an investor, I started to see Ritesh's vision become bolder and bigger every day, right? And I think when you are in that sort of ambition mindset, you will take shots, you will sort of you'll miss some of them, you'll sort of some of them will work, but ambition doesn't sort of slow down. So uh, I would leave alone the sort of pace of things and SoftBank, but I would say that our vision, as we have sort of grown older as a company, hasn't sort of abated. It has only sort of grown manyfold, right? And that will continue, and it will stay there. One of the things that, because of this vision, worked was the Europe acquisition, right? Europe is home to 24 million vacation homes. I'm talking about just vacation homes. I'm not even talking about urban homes addressable. If you add that, it becomes 40 50 million homes, right? that's a huge sort of, market. If you do the numbers, it will go into sort of, 500 billion, 700 billion type of sort of, figures, right? Because of this bolder vision, one of the strategies that we were able to sort of, execute was, other than hotels, homes is the natural sort of, big extension of, our capabilities. And Europe is a place where the largest markets for homes exist. So how do we build that? And that's where the question of build versus sort of, buy came. And do we sort of, take 10 years to build homes in Europe, or do we buy something and then sort of, oify that, right? And that really sort of, worked. In 2019, we spent $420 million, in making this acquisition. And then, Oyo Vacation Homes, as it's called, it's one of the largest sort of, businesses that we have. So, and it has given us a footprint in Europe, a large footprint. It has given us a footprint in Europe. It has made us the second largest sort of, vacation homes management company in the world, right? And it has made us offer both homes and, hotels to our consumers who, would travel across the world. And we're now sort of, launching some versions of those, things in Malaysia, Indonesia, India as well, in a certain sort of, branded format. So that's something that sort of, worked. I think the one thing that I would say didn't work as well was the rate at which we recruited people, and especially the sales managers, and the rate at which we wanted supply to scale up, and the rate at which we wanted sort of demand to scale up, according to that. I think that rate balancing, is something that we learned would needs to be much more steady than sort of exponential and explosive, especially in sort of specific countries like China, where we needed to probably do a slightly more linear form of growth than sort of this exponential form of growth. Because what happens is that once you recruit these sort of 5,000 people, the amount of time that it will take for all of those 5,000 to be productive, right? That amount of sort of load on the system. So it's much better to sort of do thousand. And the second thing we learned in that was, it is, you've got to digitize a certain part of the process. It is not prudent to only do this sort of feet on the street model. A certain part of the first part of the funnel needs to be digital, so that the conversion on the sales can be much more productive. So I think that's where a little bit of the supply acquisition strategy and balancing act was necessary. But that level of explosive growth, especially in 2019, was a little bit of learning for us.
And talking about digital, is your go-to-market still your website and your app? Or I was reading that you also using Make My Trip for bookings, and you talked about these leisure homes. So is that the primary source if someone has to book, a leisure home in Europe, for example?
Yeah, so it is always what we promise to our hotel partners is that, look, we will increase your revenue and profit anywhere between 2 to 4 times, right? So if you're earning sort of $10,000 as revenue, we will get that to sort of anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000, and if your profit is $2,000, that will become anywhere between sort of $5,000 to $6,000, right? So that 2 to 4x. Now, to do that, we have to build a Oyo channel for that particular property, whether it's a hotel or a home, doesn't matter. And we have to ensure that when that hotel or home is distributed on other networks like Booking, Airbnb, and Make My Trip, the kind of conversion and the views that hotel is getting is again sort of 2 to 3x. So we have to do sort of both the things to deliver that final result. So Make My Trip, Booking, Expedia, Airbnb, all are sort of partners in sort of doing that. That is why our direct demand percentage would vary. So in some places it would be 50% coming from Oyo, 50% coming from somewhere else. In India, it's especially high on Oyo, so it's 80-90% coming from Oyo, and sort of 10-15% coming from everything else. In some new markets, it can be completely the other way around. 20% coming from Oyo and sort of 80% coming from other distribution channels. But our first responsibility is to the hotel partners in getting this sort of 2 to 4x jump in revenue and profits, and then we sort of optimize our own sort of distribution cost based on mix of channels that we have. But you will find and Oyo on. So if you go in Europe, you'll not only find it in Airbnb and Booking and Oyo's, Dance Center and Belvilla brands, but you'll also find it in 5 other local OTAs, which are only specific to Denmark or Italy, right? And in the context of that language. So you will find a
Understood.
wide distribution that way.
What's the effect of the pandemic been on Oyo, and what's the strategy, if at all you've been just like all the other businesses have been hit hard? What's the
Right.
strategy to get out of that mess, so to say?
Look, like with any other sort of travel business, it did hit us hard, and the only good thing was that because we were very spread across India, Southeast Asia, Europe, different geography, and China, different geographies were sort of recovering at different pace, right? So by March, April, China had started to sort of recover more, and then we saw a bumper summer between May and September in Europe, right? And then India started recovering, after September, October, right? So at some level, this diversification helped us balance it. Obviously, we became very sharp on two things. One, we took this period as a strategic sort of maneuver to build every technology possible to make sure that our cost of running the business, or cost of sort of servicing our hotel partners and customers is very technology led, and that comes down at a unit level. So we took the entire year just to sort of build small tools, YoChat and Koyo. These are sort of our partner and consumer facing platforms, uh, which helped us sort of bring that cost curve down. So COVID helped us in creating a PNL for which the threshold of global profitability lowered quite a bit. So if we had to reach X revenues, to become globally profitable, that is like down by 70-80%. So we can be globally profitable, at even sort of 50% of sort of pre-COVID levels. So right. So to that extent, it has considerably helped us in shortening our sort of time to profitability, which is always sort of a very good thing. So I think people look at COVID in a very disheartening manner, but for businesses, I think it does give them time, and it does give them sort of time to sort of focus on certain things which will build really well for the future. And the other thing as a part of COVID we did a little bit of geographical prioritization. So India, Southeast Asia, and Europe, where we already had those product market fit matrix that I explained, and we were anyway very profitable or closer to profitability. We prioritized investments in those sort of markets versus some of the other markets. So COVID helped us do some of this geographical prioritization, build technology tools, and reduce the threshold of global profitability. And I think Ritesh put out a blog about, I think, 3-4 days back, where we talked about Europe already being profitable and India also being profitable since sort of December. So two of our largest geographies, are already profitable. Southeast Asia is very close. So three of our core geographies, which contribute 80-90% of the business, right, are already sort of profitable. So I think that has been very interesting way of dealing with COVID.
Excellent. We have 2 minutes to go, so I'll ask you one last question. From your vantage point, both as a VC and now working on the other side with the startup, and no longer a startup, I guess it's become massive. But what are some of the advice that you would give to some of the founders who are listening in early stage, mostly early stage, I would say? What's the advice that you would give?
So, two pieces of advice for founders and people wanting to become founders. And this is something that, comes from somebody I really, really love called Naval. He's the founder of AngelList and now a philosopher as well. So,
Mhm.
he says something very interesting. You can't gain your financial freedom by renting out your life,
Yeah.
right? So don't focus on, salary is not going to make you rich, right? So if you want to, first of all, getting rich and wealthy is another debate. But if you want financial freedom and you want to do whatever you want to do with your life after getting that financial freedom, salary is not going to get you there, right? Just 20% increment, 30% increment. Don't focus on that. Don't rent out your life, right? be creative, know what you're good at, and just go ahead and start up, right? And that is the only way to sort of gain that freedom. And the second thing I would say is that if you have started up, be very, very patient. Most companies, if you look at the best of companies, whether it is Amazon or it is Airbnb or it is Shopify, and some of these names are very popular these days. You would look at the first 4 to 5 years of their journey would be very, very slow, right? They wouldn't even be known. They would be questioned. So don't be in a hurry to create a big company. It is okay to sort of walk at a snail's pace and do the right things, find the right product market fit, listen to your customers and sort of partners. And it's okay if your company is not a unicorn in the first 5 years, right? Don't be in a hurry to sort of do that. Companies get built over sort of compounding effects of what you do in the first 5 to 7 years, and the real results only show up after that. You'll be thankful to sort of be patient, and make sure your team understands that. So don't be in a hurry to create the first 1 year or 2 year unicorn, because as Chamath, again, one of the persons I follow, says that if the half life of the company, if you scale up really fast in the next 5 years, most of those companies come down in the next 5. Your total life is 10 years. So if you have scaled up very slowly in the first 10 years, then it is very likely that that half life will improve. So you will not come down in the next 10 years. It will take 20-30 years for you to come down. So you've built a company for 30 to 40 years. So always remember that the faster you scale, the faster you will come down. So be patient, and build the company in a right way. And that's the virtue that every entrepreneur who's looking forward to build a big company should live by.
So from where I see it, it looks like just like Surya in the match day before yesterday. Oyo's been hitting sixes right from the start. It doesn't look like it's been a slow progress. You're one of those companies that we're extremely proud of, and the Indian story, and one of the few Indian multinationals now, and with the brand, recognizable brand worldwide. Thank you so much, Maninder. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I think we covered a lot of ground, and hopefully our listeners and viewers would have learned something from your journey as well.
And final thing I would say, which as I missed as an advice, care about your employees. I think there are a lot of sort of entrepreneurs who care more about their investors, and everything is about sort of the investor, what the investor wants. Care about your employees, and there are a lot of ways to do that, right? Think about their ESOP pools, think about their sort of motivation much more than you would sort of think about other constituents of the ecosystem. So do that.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Maninder.
All right. All right. Thank you, Sameer sir. Thank you, Maninder sir, for joining the session. This brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much for a wonderful session, sir. It was a truly enriching experience. And we hope to host you again and learn more about business models and how to scale them using data and metrics, sir. And for now, we bring the session to a close. And thank you once again, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maninder. Bye.
Thank you, sir.